Hi, everybody. I'm Diane Brady. I'm here with Ian Bremmer, who is a political scientist, also president of Eurasia Group. Ian, always good to see you. How are you?
Great. Good to be back with you. We've seen a bunch of each other recently. How do you
I
like that?
know it's a delight every time. I want to start today with President Biden is in Japan and cutting his trip short. Let's first of all talk about the agenda for this trip, because obviously the timing from a things going on in Washington point of view isn't ideal.
It's an understatement, eh? He had to tell the Australians literally hours after they were promoting the visit. The prime minister is very excited about it, visiting his hometown, and he's like, "Nah, I'm not coming for the Quad,"
The
which the
Quad Summit.
Chinese are going to do wheelies around that. So it's embarrassing for the United States, embarrassing for Biden. It doesn't really affect the U.S.-Australia relationship. You'll remember that Obama canceled on the Aussies twice. So apparently this is a rich custom in American diplomatic history.
Well, it's weird. I mean, first of all, this has been planned for some time. I mean, we could have seen this coming, but I want to start with the trip itself.
Yeah.
What's the motivation? This 7-day trip that he was taking?
Well, the motivation is that the G7 has become the critical nexus of where the United States drives foreign policy internationally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in part because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It's in part because of China's growth in economic and military power, particularly in Asia, without being particularly aligned with advanced industrial democracies. And both of those things has made the G7 more relevant, stronger, more cohesive. The G7 has also been a place where additional countries are invited, reached out to be more engaged. And then on the back of that, the Quad, which is, of course, a new formulation, on the back of the United States under Obama, trying to move on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, what would have been the most important multilateral trade deal the U.S. had inked in decades, couldn't get it done. Trump pulls out, but the Quad is the most meaningful piece of new architecture that brings the United States more diplomatic, economic, and military engagement in Asia with its allies and partners in Asia. And so that's the reason for the trip. There was also going to be the first ever trip by a U.S. president to Papua New Guinea, which is by far the poorest of the APEC countries. It's an island nation, archipelago nation. And now I can use the pun that Biden will be PNG in PNG. He will be persona non grata in Papua New Guinea. I don't think anyone's ever used that joke before.
I think we're going to trademark that, and I'm going to attribute it to you. But, I know all allies are, of course, precious, but why not just say to Japan the same thing you said to Australia, which is, sorry, bad timing? Is it more, are they not quite as, aligned with us as Australia, no matter what?
No, it's not that. In fact, I would say, if anything, Japan might be even more aligned, simply because they have a so much more directly and historically charged and challenging relationship with China.
Yep.
So no, the Japanese relationship with the United States is utterly indispensable, and there is a lot of trust at the top there. No, more it's that canceling on the G7 and all of those heads of state coming together, and the policies that are going to be discussed on responding to the Russian invasion with this Ukraine counteroffensive, on additional sanctions that might be needed, on taking the frozen assets and seizing them for Ukrainian reconstruction, and of course coordinating on trade, export policies, controls, all those things on China. There's a very rich agenda for the G7 that Biden not showing up for would both undermine. You just couldn't get it done effectively remotely, And also, it would look horrible. And I think that this was the right thing to do. I think that if you want to try to balance between showing that the debt limit negotiations are moving forward, but they're utterly indispensable, you have to get it done, and that is your priority. So, you know, you're going to make this last minute change, but you don't act like you're no longer president of the most powerful country in the world. And you're not going to allow dysfunction in Washington to prevent you from performing statesman duties. And I think that you want to send both of those messages. And I think that this was the right way to split the baby.
Okay. That's another term I'm going to coin on your behalf for you. Split the baby. I like that one too.
That's a horrible term. It feels like red state, blue state on abortion laws. I really wouldn't want to be attached to that.
Let's move to Washington because the markets have shrugged off.
You're just not touching that. I don't blame you.
I'm not touching that one. But the markets have shrugged off, you know, the whole debt ceiling debate. Is that a mistake? I mean, because we have. I mean, I don't know if this June deadline is in fact the deadline where everything, you know, falls apart. But if so, then it would seem we're in very perilous terrain right now.
So, you know, let me turn that back on you. Can the markets make a mistake? Right? I mean, if those money flows or lack thereof reflects the consensus view, right, of the level of danger that presently exists, I mean, if that changes, the markets are going to change. And right now, I mean, I don't just mean investors. I mean, when I talk to central bank governors in the last week, there's a general sense of, yeah, Congress can do stupid, but they can't do that stupid. In other words, they're playing chicken, they're threatening each other, but ultimately they're not going to crash. I think that's right. I feel comfortable that there will not be a default on sovereign debt, and that we will not be facing in a month's time a major recession and a stock market crash and spiking unemployment and emerging market failures because McCarthy and Biden were incapable of ultimately getting something done. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think that there will be pain, and I think the markets will eventually move significantly before a deal is done. In other words, we have not yet gotten to peak debt limit crisis, and the level of complacency that exists today is unlikely to persist at this level as we get closer to X date.
And the pain being what, a credit downgrade? What does pain look like?
I don't know that we have to get to a credit downgrade. I'm not an economist, and I'm not inside.
I'm just a political scientist, damn it. But
yeah. So I'm not the person, fortunately, who has to make the call on a Moody's or an S&P, and you know when would that get triggered. I will tell you that politically, I think it will take McCarthy at least 10 days from when a deal is nominally sketched out with Biden to the point that he can convince his caucus in the House to vote for it, given just how narrow his margin for error is with the Freedom Caucus. In other words, I don't think he gets to a deal and then he puts it to a vote and they say yes. I think they say no, and then he has to go back, and then they say no again, and then he has to go back. Like, I think this is going to take like us right up to the nominal June 1 date. I don't think it can get done by June 1 personally. If I haven't said that publicly, I'll make that prediction. I don't think it can get done by June 1. Yeah. That means that a couple of things could happen. First, Janet Yellen might say, yeah, I said June 1, that was my estimate, but really it's June 15. And so you've got a little bit more time. That
Take the summer.
Secondarily, we could get to June 1. The economist might be saying it really is June 1. Tax receipts weren't so great. We're really worried about this. And then you could have the members of the House be willing to support a 1 month punt to provide more time for negotiations. That could happen. Or you could get closer and closer, and some of the Republican caucus could say, we are okay with prioritization. Let's go past the X date because we're not going to default. Instead, there'll be a small number of bills that we won't pay. We'll still pay our sovereign debt off. And that's going to cause all sorts of crazy hair on fire panic. But that will also maybe get a slightly sweeter deal, juicier deal to reduce some of those progressive policies from Biden. And let's be clear, this is not all the Republicans' fault. I mean, Biden was capable of sitting down and negotiating with McCarthy months ago. He chose not to. Now he is. And the reason he's doing it now when he said he wasn't going to before is because the Republicans held and stuck to their guns. So, I mean, from their perspective, that was the right strategy.
Let me ask you about, since you've also been tracking what's happening with the let's say the GOP contender field, the Durham Report that came out this week, do you think that that is a gift to Trump in terms of where, and why so?
Because it allows him and his supporters to say that all of this Russia stuff was mishandled. And they ran with it for a couple of years, and we knew it was mishandled. We told you it was mishandled. It was overdone. And I think that's correct, and I think the Durham Report makes that clear. And look, I also think that some of the Hunter Biden stuff gives Biden a gift. I mean, you saw that coming out of the House, they had a whistleblower, now they can't find their whistleblower. I've never seen that happen before. So, where's the beef? I mean, I don't think Hunter's a good guy. I suspect he's probably done a few things that probably have broken some laws. But so far, this has been a nothing burger, and the Republicans were promising this was going to be a big deal. So, I think there's a fair amount of exaggeration that seems to be going on with just how much is going to be brought to the public. Of course, the partisans don't care.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, this is all just for your local base, and that's part of the problem. And if you no longer know what's true, you kind of don't have a democracy. And we are on that slope right now. Like that pathway, that momentum is
to not having a democracy. To go back to, since you are a betting man earlier on the debt ceiling, if you were to place a bet on who will be the candidates for president, do you think it will be another Biden-Trump election?
Of course. I mean, that's an easy bet. And
even
Biden,
with legal swirl,
is functionally running unopposed. I mean, I know Marianne Williamson is in the race, and that essentially means Biden is running unopposed. RFK Jr., I think, as well, and that's it. I mean, no one serious is going to run against Biden unless he has a significant health incident.
Yep.
And on the Trump side, it's early, but no one's running against him. People are running, but they're not running against Trump. And I want to quote the great Ric Flair of wrestling fame, that if you want to be the man, you got to beat the man. And I don't see any of these candidates that are out there trying to beat the man. They say, well, there's a lane, there's a different lane. No, there's one lane. Trump is occupying the lane. And if you are in a lane and someone is in that lane, you got to take them out.
Maybe they're waiting for,
wouldn't
they be waiting for, like, whether it's Alvin Bragg or some other, E. Jean Carroll, like, name all the different cases that are swirling around him in the courts. Maybe the hope is that will take him down on their behalf.
They're waiting for Godot, frankly, and it ain't coming. I mean, none of those cases are going to be concluded before the nomination has been decided. So you're waiting for those cases? No. And Trump has been going all in on witch hunt. I mean, look, E. Jean Carroll has just been granted a $5 million decision for sexual assault, and I see Mike Pence running away, no comment. I see DeSantis running away.
I know.
That's insanity. You're running against Trump, and you're not going to stick a knife in this guy? I mean, come on. Like, I mean, I hate to say it, but like, grow a pair. Jesus.
Well, and
Nikki Haley, I mean, wants to be Trump's vice president, and that's why she's attacking DeSantis with Trump's own nicknames, DeSanctimonious. She's doing that, right?
Yep.
And she's the only one running a coherent campaign, in my view, because she knows what she wants and has a shot at getting it. You know, and I feel like she's been very coordinated with Trump, including when she decided to throw in her hat in the ring. She went down and she talked to Trump about it beforehand. So she's politically savvy. The rest of these guys are pretenders.
You know, I could take all day, and I'd love to, but I want to pivot to one other thing, take us back to the 30,000 foot level. And we've seen a preview of what a President Trump would do on the global stage. You know, you mentioned TPP and such. What would our allies think if that particular president got reelected again? And I'm projecting pretty far in the future here, but these discussions are going on right now, certainly in Japan.
Depends on the ally. So let's keep in mind that there were some allies that liked Trump a lot more than Biden.
Yep.
I'm thinking about, Poland, Hungary, which is a NATO ally, even though they don't always act like it.
Yep.
Certainly Saudi Arabia, not Israel under Bibi, the UAE, and maybe Modi and India, maybe, though it's close. So, I mean, those are some countries that would be perfectly happy, very comfortable if Trump comes back. The Canadians would be verklempt.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese would be distressed. The South Koreans would be quite distressed. The mainstream Europeans would be very upset. Now, one thing that a lot of people say, and I think is not true, is that, well, this time around, if Trump wins, he's gotten so crazy, he's going to get only horrible people will join with him. So it'll be a dumpster fire of an administration. That's not true.
Mm-hmm.
I think if he gets the nomination, I think the whole GOP, with a few exceptions, are going to get behind him. And I think a lot of very competent people will join his cabinet.
Yeah.
Because they want power. And so I think Trump too will be more capable of breaking things because they'll be more experienced. And so you'll see that in terms of hollowing out and creating more loyalty among individual departments in the United States. That'll have more domestic policy implications because he cares about that more. On the foreign policy side, he doesn't do very much. And what he does is volatile, but it also is constrained by his own cabinet, by his advisors. And we see that with Putin. I mean, people saying that, suddenly Trump would like make an alliance with Putin. No, he was prevented from doing that by everybody last time around.
Yeah.
He had that embarrassing summit meeting with Putin in Helsinki, and then nothing happened because Pompeo and Fiona Hill and all of the rest of them said, no, we're not playing that.
Yeah.
And I do think that would limit U.S. aid for Ukraine. Absolutely. I think that's a danger of a Trump administration coming in. But it's not like NATO would suddenly fall apart. And so, look, I think the big problem is the lack of confidence, the lack of coherence in working with the United States if you're an ally that really is worried about Trump. And that in a period of crisis, and remember, Trump, when he was president, didn't have any crises.
Yeah.
But he would this time around. That would make it much more dangerous.
Ian, your latest book, The Power of Crisis, is out in paperback with a new epilogue about Russia. What do you have to update us on about that?
Well, the book came out. I had to finish it. I had to put the manuscript to bed 3 days, if I remember correctly, after the invasion started. And so I wrote like a few pages at the end, but Russia wasn't really in it. And of course, the conceit of the book is that you need a crisis big enough to get you off your ass, but not so big that it, sort of destroys everything. And that actually drives a lot of geopolitical progress. And it turns out that the Russian invasion is a really great example of everything I talked about in my book. From 2014, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, that was a crisis too small for anyone to bother to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
But when Putin actually came in on February 24th, well, that got NATO stronger. That got the G7 stronger. That got the Democrats and Republicans united on a big issue. And it also allowed the Ukrainians to defend themselves. So you're now seeing NATO expand, and you're seeing Ukraine join the EU. And you're seeing an incredible level of military support, coordination, and diplomatic coordination from the United States and most of its advanced industrial allies, because the crisis was big enough. And the book's all about that. So it was nice to be able to use that and kind of go through what we've seen in the last year.
Great. One other question, if you don't mind, which is Erdogan, Turkey, and we're going into round 2 now, May 28th. How consequential is that for the U.S. or others?
Well, given that the election is not going to change the leadership, it's not very consequential. I mean, Kılıçdaroğlu, ran a pretty good campaign. He was able to consolidate most of the opposition. Usually the opposition is very fragmented. He did as well as could be expected in a fair election, in a free election, but not a fair election, in the sense that the opposition gets virtually no coverage in the media, and that's by design.
Mm-hmm.
The judiciary prevented some from running. Erdogan has a lot of capacity to ensure that he can win. And he got 49.5% in the first round and secured a majority in parliament for his coalition. And all he needs, so he almost won in the first round. This is a layup. He's going to win easily in the second round in 2 weeks, and we go back to business as usual with the Turks.
Well, more to come, and again, Power of Crisis out today in paperback. And thanks for joining us, Ian.
Good to see you. Talk to you soon.
Good to see you too.